Before they go to the audience, we're waiting just a couple of minutes. We have a supervisor on his way who's en route, and so just maybe wait 5 minutes. But we also want to respect that another supervisor has to be somewhere by 2:30, so we kind of split the difference.
Who's the late one?
That would be Keith Ray.
Of course it's Keith.
Yeah. I didn't say he did.
We'll call this meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join me for a moment of silence. Thank you very much. Please silence your phones, pagers, and other devices. Item number 1 is approval of claims. I will move approval.
Second.
Motion by DeWitt and a tie for second for Audubon. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Passes 3-0. Item number 2, approval of a public statement concerning the status of Woodbury County Mental Health Services in Sioux Rivers and Rolling Hills regions. Mr. Taylor, would you mind starting with this, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. As you know, the status of Woodbury County Mental Health Services has been in flux as Woodbury County seeks to move regions from its present region previous to some decisions that were made in Sioux Rivers to Rolling Hills in the future. And so what I'd like to do is read this position statement that has been crafted and then ask for the support of the board. And one of the reasons is that I think it's important that we speak collectively so that one supervisor doesn't purport to speak for the majority of the board. So here is the statement, and then I'll move it subsequently. On May 29th, Iowa Department of Human Services Director Jerry Foxhoven conducted the second of 2 meetings with representatives from Plymouth, Sioux, and Woodbury counties. In light of the department's mandate that Woodbury County must remain in the Sioux Rivers region for fiscal year 2019, the stated purpose of the meeting was to ensure that necessary steps were undertaken to allow Plymouth, Sioux, and Woodbury counties to continue to operate as a region during that time. We appreciated Director Foxhoven's acknowledgement that effective July 1st, 2019, Woodbury County has, quote, found a new home in Rolling Hills and will be allowed to exit the Sioux Rivers region, as well as his clear directive that given Woodbury County's departure, Sioux County and Plymouth County must take steps to assure that on July 1st, 2019, they are in compliance with state law, requiring each region to have at least 3 member counties. At the meeting on May 29th, Woodbury County identified several issues it wished to address in an amended 2080 agreement that would govern the operation of the Sioux Rivers region during fiscal year 19, including weighted voting rights and the status of the Crisis and Stabilization Center. During the course of discussions, it became clear that consensus could not be reached on those issues. We left the meeting, however, believing that agreement had been reached on several basic non-controversial matters, including a spending level for the upcoming fiscal year 19 budget, the reserve level number, ownership of the Triview building, and Woodbury County's offer to abstain from voting on new counties seeking membership in the Sioux Rivers region. Woodbury County's legal counsel offered to draft a binding memorandum of understanding to reflect the agreements reached at the meeting. The proposed memorandum of understanding was delivered to Director Foxhoven and Sioux and Plymouth counties on June 8th. Director Foxhoven confirmed to us that the memorandum accurately reflected the consensus reached at the meeting on May 29th and should be signed by the parties. However, despite repeated requests made to Council for Sioux and Plymouth counties to provide feedback, amendments, revisions, or suggestions regarding the memorandum, nothing was forthcoming. Based on the belief that neither Plymouth County nor Sioux County would agree to a memorandum of understanding that reflected the terms agreed to in principle at the May 29th meeting, on June 27th, Woodbury County's council proposed a revised memorandum to the Sioux County attorney that simply provided the parties agree to adhere to a stable budget of relative stability. Sioux County Attorney Thomas Kunstl indicated he thought the revised memorandum would be acceptable to the Sioux County Board of Supervisors. However, on June 28th, Plymouth County Attorney Darren Raymond responded that Plymouth County favored a, quote, comprehensive agreement memorializing how we got where we are and a resolution of as many issues as possible. And that given his schedule, it would be likely July or August before we could expect to receive anything further. We were advised on June 29th that the Sioux County Board of Supervisors voted not to approve the memorandum on the advice of the Sioux County Attorney that the current 2080 agreement is sufficient. At this point, it is clear to Woodbury County that Sioux and Plymouth counties are not committed to engaging in meaningful efforts to arrive at a timely and mutually acceptable amended 2080 agreement. Despite that, Woodbury County's first commitment is to assure that necessary and appropriate mental health and disability services are provided to its residents. We recognize that for the next 12 months, continued membership in the Sioux Rivers region is the only reasonable means by which to deliver those critical services. Short of a legal challenge that could cast doubt on the delivery of services during fiscal year 19, we are convinced the better choice remains to continue our advocacy for essential programs such as the Crisis and Stabilization Center under Siouxland Mental Health, To that end, Woodbury County will make a diligent effort to work cooperatively with Sioux and Plymouth counties for the next 12 months when possible. We will also continue to monitor expenditures and the Sioux Rivers budget very closely. Any attempt to deviate materially from the budget, and we're not talking about paying service claims, in order to impede Woodbury County's transition to Rolling Hills or to inordinately spend down reserve levels will be vigorously resisted. If forced, Woodbury County is prepared to take legal action to protect the delivery of essential and appropriate services, our taxpayers, and the bright future we anticipate when we join Rolling Hills. Over the next 12 months, we will also devote considerable time and energy to the important transition process to Rolling Hills. Woodbury County remains committed to meeting its funding obligations to Rolling Hills. Both Woodbury County and Rolling Hills have operated in a spirit of doing what is good, right, and fair, and we are confident that will continue. We anticipate that Rolling Hills CEO Dawn Metzer will meet with providers in late August to begin to learn more about our community and services. Woodbury County will work to budget with Rolling Hills during the period from January to March of 2019 in anticipation of FY20. We will always maintain our advocacy for our high-quality providers, a climate of fairness and respect, and meaningful efforts aimed at serving those we are called to serve. That is the public statement, Mr. Chair, and I would move that statement and ask for a second.
Motion by Taylor, second by DeWitt to adopt this statement.
I'm going to open to any questions or discussion.
Mr. Potabom or Reddick?
Well, I simply go back to day one. Unfortunately, we've gotten to this point that I don't think we should have ever gotten to. But I, for one, am still concerned about where we go forward and what services are going to be impacted. You know, we were worried about July 1. Well, July 1 is here, and we still don't know. And I appreciate that we say we're going to fight for our constituents and make sure we do it, but everything's still in limbo. And it just worries the heck out of me about what's going to happen to some of the services.
May I respond, Mr. Brown?
Yes, sir.
So this statement is to put to rest any sort of limbo that there is. In other words, the statement is saying that we are affirming that even though we do not have what we believe to be some agreed upon parameters, we are assenting, we are in Sioux Rivers for this next year. And we are assenting that for this next year, we are not challenging that fact. So I would think that it would be a bridge to assure that any services that are being reviewed, revised, or changed are being done under Sioux Rivers, but those services should not be in doubt. That this statement shouldn't cast further doubt. It should.
And I wish I read it that way, but when I read anything where it talks about, you know, short of legal matters, and that we do reserve the right, and I remember discussions here where we said, hey, we're going to negotiate open and fair with Sioux and Plymouth County, even though we don't think they're willing to do it. That kind of hinders open and fair negotiations when you doubt the other side's participation in an open meeting. And when I read this from them, unfortunately, and it may just be the way I read it, there's parts of it that still have me thinking, do we believe this, or are we just putting out a good words? And that's just where I stand personally on it. I wish we had never gotten here.
There's part of me that questions whether they're in it when they say that they're just happen to be too busy until July or August. I struggle with that myself, Marty.
Well, I do too, but my problem is I see what has been a service for people with severe disabilities that's got more into personalities, I think, just from my view, watching it from the outside, because I haven't been involved in the meetings. And I think that's part of what's happening is I think it's sort of like a tit for tat. Well, we're going to get even with you. We're not going to do this. We're going to make you struggle through this. And to me, it's just wrong when everything we're supposed to be worried about is service to our citizens.
I absolutely agree that that's what this should be about, and I believe what it is about. Unfortunately, and tried to lay out a timeline of all the things that we were worried about. We were worried about the Crisis and Stabilization Center, which has been severely, drastically reduced, that the majority of this board fought for. We wanted to have some voting parameters. We've shed those. The last thing we were asking is for a budget, or give us some language. And we met in good faith. We didn't get that. And so now, when I say short of a legal challenge, it means exactly that we are not, at this current juncture, we are affirming that there's a greater good and that we are there to give stability to providers who aren't being severely reduced at this time.
And again, I think it's all in how you read it. And I mean, and it was mentioned in here about the voting. I remember when we tried to get them to give us 2 votes to each of their 1, and they wouldn't accept that. Okay, I understand that, but that's still mentioned in here.
Right, but it's mentioned as something that was dropped. It's mentioned as something that we said we no longer were fighting for because we knew it was a bridge too far. The Crisis and Stabilization Center, even though I think it's important, we knew that that was a bridge too far for them. So then we came to all we want is a relatively stable budget, but we didn't hear anything further. And so at this point, rather than making this binding MOU the only way that we can continue, we're saying we're back in. I would hope that those who have been advocating for exactly that position would now accept it and say, thank you for continuing on, rather than making it an impediment to continuing.
I would hope so too, but unfortunately I just see too much personalities in not only this, but in the whole mess that we're in. And I learned a long time ago in my first occupation that sometimes when personalities get involved, you don't settle a dispute. And that's unfortunate, because for us as a governing body, that means it's our citizens who are the ones that are worried. Were we given the same service we've been? God, I hope so. But my problem is it hasn't sold me. I hope so. Nothing would make me happier than 1 year from now saying, hey, I was wrong. They got the services that we wanted. Everything was delivered on time. And the people we needed to serve were served. And I think as a member of this board, that's my duty to make sure we try to do that. I just don't know how we've gotten here.
And I think we probably have a philosophical divide on whether it's personalities or whether it's advocating for mental health services. But I know we probably won't bridge that necessarily, but I respect your opinion and point of view.
Well, I don't think there's anybody on this board nor anybody in this room that isn't concerned about the services. So,
and I think it's also fair to note that Friendship House was already cut. Crisis and Stabilization Center was already cut. Core services that are provided by our largest provider, providing services to the largest amount of people, are the ones that have already been cut. So, I mean, that's already on the table. It's already been done. And I would say against this board's wishes.
Well, and I agree with that, but again, I think we go back to step one, and I think a lot of that was done as we're going to get even from the other two sides.
And I think if that's the case, I absolutely agree that cutting, if I can't imagine cutting any provider by over $1.2 million. But I don't want to make that same accusation that it was Plymouth or Sioux County getting even, as you mentioned, Mr. Potabom. I just think that it's time to move forward, and that's what I'm hoping. We will start budgeting. We will not budget again with Sioux and Plymouth. We will be budgeting in January with Rolling Hills. The CEO, which I'm very excited about, her leadership and efforts, she'll start meeting with providers next month. And we need to start looking forward rather than backwards. So,
well said.
Thank you. Do we have any input from the citizens?
Flora Lee, Sioux City resident. What concerns me is the fact that I was at the last Sioux Rivers meeting when they discussed the issues. And what concerns me is that, Mr. Taylor, you weren't there and you're making all the decisions and writing the, having the statement read when it was Mr. Raddick and Mr. Ung that were there. Why are you the spokesperson and they are not?
I will answer that, Flora.
Thank you.
Because Mr. Taylor was involved with Sioux Rivers in the last year. He was instrumental in getting started with us separating from Sioux Rivers, and I chose Mr. Taylor to continue that and see it through.
Okay.
That is why.
Because it just didn't make sense to me, since he's no longer a part of that, to see all the dynamics that are going on there.
And for the same reason that I had Mr. Raddick stay there, and I also put Mr. Ung back as a chairman's decision, because Mr. Ung had experience with it from the year prior, and Mr. Taylor was the most recent, so it was my decision to put him there,
Okay.
as we said.
Well, I understand that.
Okay.
You're the chair. But I needed some understanding,
And
because
that's-
I've sat on boards and usually it's always someone that's represented on that committee or that board that does the speaking. So I just needed clarification.
I can see where that wouldn't be clear, but thank you.
Clarify that Jeremy is the liaison to Rolling Hills. He's done a lot of the meetings with Jerry Foxhoven, and he's done a lot of the meetings with legal staff as well.
Anybody else? Oh, I'm sorry.
And that's one important thing to note, is that one of the ideas with the MOU with Rolling Hills is that we will start meeting with them sooner than actually being officially there. And so those meetings will continue to happen.
And do you have those dates when those will happen? Will those be publicized and open to the
Absolutely,
public?
they're public meetings.
Okay, all right. And the other thing I just have to ask too, as we go into, as a county, as we go into this partnership with Rolling Hills, how many people will lose their positions in Woodbury County, if at all?
Those staffing decisions have to be made by Rolling Hills, so we don't know if positions will be kept stable or if they'll be added to.
Okay. I think it's really needed that you have people in Woodbury County, because, we are an urban area, and when we were at Rolling Hills in Holstein when they met, that was one of the concerns of the Rolling Hills people, is that Woodbury County has Sioux City, which is an urban area, and they're not accustomed to working with urban people, and we need to make sure we take care of people.
Yeah. And I think some of their experience having some urban areas, unlike really Sioux and Plymouth, may help those dynamics. We'll see.
Any further comments?
Yeah, Dick Owens, 1400 Indian Hills Drive, Sioux City. Just specifically, tell me how this changes anything.
This right here?
Yeah.
It's an affirmation. I think that it puts to rest anything that Woodbury County would put forward as a legal challenge to go back into Sioux Rivers. I think it affirms that we are making a statement that we want to closely monitor the budget to protect taxpayers, to protect services, and to protect our ability to go into Rolling Hills next year.
Aren't you doing that now?
Aren't we doing what?
What, watching the budget?
Absolutely.
Then why does this change it?
I think this makes sure that it's publicly noticed that we are monitoring so that there isn't an inordinate amount of spending that takes place to the detriment of our ability to go forward into Rolling Hills.
You can do that now.
Absolutely. That's why this is a statement. This is trying to affirm for people who have put forward that there may be a loss of service, which several people have put forward in our community that could be the case, that there will not be any. And we hope it would be welcomed.
You're saying then we're not going to have loss in services when we go to Rolling Hills?
No. I'll clarify. I'm saying that we currently and presently, besides the services that Sioux Rivers is presently pulling back from, that there will not be a loss of service from what is currently being provided. It's a way to allay any concerns.
maybe it's my age. I honestly can't see why this has any relevance at all. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Connie Barrett, advocate. Many times when you were reading that, you got away from the microphone. Is this printed somewhere so that we can actually
Absolutely.
read it?
Sure.
Does everybody get something?
Yeah, absolutely.
Too much of it I missed.
Yeah, sorry, sometimes I put my mic
Yeah,
high.
when you reach over there and talk to somebody like this, your microphone does not pick it up at all.
I'll do better in the future.
We'll chat with the auditor about that maybe.
It's probably user error.
Gives us a chance to get Butler to do something.
Obviously, we need to read it now before we can comment. This could be passed out ahead of time.
Did you write it just to speak on it today, essentially?
Right,
Oh,
on the
okay.
position of the board to make sure that it was affirmed.
I know we're talking about cuts to some of the programs. I was just curious what would... Oh, sorry.
What's your name?
Carter Smith,
Carter.
resident of Sioux City, Iowa. Thank you. I know we're talking about cuts to some of the programs and concerns about the budget. I was just wondering, going forward as we go through the transition, what would happen to some of the funding from Sioux Rivers for the ARC Summer School program and the Sanford Center with their program with youth? If that would be continued over, or what would happen?
Go ahead.
Thank you. So that will be a decision of the Rolling Hills Governance Board. My understanding is that their intention will be to have providers that are non-core services make application to their governance board so that they can learn the programs that we're currently providing and have a thorough review of them. One of the reasons that they've chosen October is so that they'll have plenty of time ahead of their budgeting to be able to review all programs going forward.
Do they have any programs that currently serve youth in Rolling Hills?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's all I need to know.
Thank you. Any further comments from the public? I would ask for a roll call vote, please, Mr. Auditor.
Raddick?
Aye.
Potabom?
No.
Taylor?
Aye.
DeWitt?
Aye. Passes 3-1. Mr. Potabom opposed. Do you have any further comments, Mr. Taylor?
Just that there is no meeting tomorrow.
There is no meeting tomorrow, and we are adjourned.
If there is no objection, I will be recording Mr. Raddick as an aye vote on the claims.
There's no objection.
You don't count. You don't get to object.